The text message that destroyed my life arrived at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, glowing like a neon sign in the darkness of our bedroom. I need all our vacation money immediately. My ex was arrested. I have to bail him out. I stared at those words until they burned into my retinas, listening to Julia's fake sleeping breath beside me. She was waiting for my response, probably had been rehearsing this moment for weeks. How noble of her to finally show her true colors. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Mark Ellison, and I'm 41 years old. I spent the last 2 years thinking I'd finally gotten my life together. Software engineer, decent salary, nice apartment in downtown Portland. Most importantly, I thought I'd found someone who actually gave a damn about me. Julia Hayes, 29, fitness instructor at Pulse Gym, with legs that could stop traffic and a smile that made me forget I was just another middle-aged guy with a receding hairline. Turns out I was right about being forgettable. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent my entire adult life being the responsible one, the guy who balanced checkbooks and remembered anniversaries, while everyone else lived like teenagers. My ex-wife Sarah had cleaned out our joint account to fund her art therapy retreat in Costa Rica with her yoga instructor. My business partner Dave had embezzled 30 grand from our startup to impress some 22-year-old bartender, and now Julia wanted me to bankroll her ex-boyfriend's legal troubles. I was apparently the human equivalent of an ATM with legs. How noble, I typed back, then deleted it. Instead, I got up quietly, grabbed my laptop, and walked to the kitchen. The apartment felt different in the darkness, like I was seeing it clearly for the first time. The expensive coffee machine Julia had insisted we needed. The organic everything filling our refrigerator. The designer workout clothes scattered across every surface. All purchased with my money, of course. I opened my banking app and stared at our joint account. $43,000. Our future together fund, as Julia liked to call it. Money I'd saved for the ring I was planning to buy next month, for the house we'd talked about, for the life I thought we were building. Trevor Cale. That was the ex-boyfriend's name. Julia had mentioned him exactly 3 times in 2 years, always with the same dismissive wave of her hand. Just some guy from my past, baby. You know how it is. I knew how it was, all right. I just hadn't known I was the backup plan. My phone buzzed. Another message from Julia, sent from the bathroom where she was undoubtedly hiding. Mark, please. I know this is crazy, but Trevor's in real trouble. He owes some dangerous people money, and they used him as a scapegoat for their gambling operation. I can't just let him rot in jail. The thing about lies is that they reveal more truth than the liar realizes. Julia had just admitted she knew about Trevor's gambling debts and his criminal associates, which meant she'd been in contact with him for a while, which meant everything else was probably bullshit too. I closed the laptop and walked back to the bedroom. Julia was sitting up now, phone in hand, trying to look vulnerable and desperate. She'd always been good at that look. It's probably what attracted me in the first place. The idea that someone beautiful might actually need me. We need to talk, I said. I know this seems sudden, she started, but I held up my hand. How long have you been seeing him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Julia's face went through several expressions, surprise, hurt, indignation, before settling on defiance. I'm not seeing him, Mark. God, is that what you think of me? He's just a friend who needs help. Friends don't usually require $43,000 in bail money. It's not bail money, it's... She stopped herself, realizing she'd been caught in another lie. It's what, Julia? She stood up, wrapping her robe around herself like armor. Fine. Yes. I've been talking to Trevor. He's been having problems, and I felt bad for him. That doesn't mean I'm cheating on you. But you are. It wasn't a question, and we both knew it. The late-night texts, the secretive phone calls, The way she'd started working out at different times to avoid me picking her up from the gym. The signs had been there for months. I'd just been too pathetic to acknowledge them. Julia's silence was answer enough. I walked to my dresser and pulled out a suitcase. I'm going to Bali. Always wanted to see it, and now seems like the perfect time for a solo vacation. Mark, don't be ridiculous. We can work this out. I started packing, methodically folding clothes while she watched. You're right. We can work this out. Here's how. You move out while I'm gone. Take your things, leave your key, and disappear from my life. When I get back, I want you gone. You can't be serious. I stopped packing and looked at her. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in months. She was beautiful, no doubt about that. But there was something cold in her eyes. Something calculating that I'd been too infatuated to notice before. I froze our joint account 10 minutes ago, I said calmly. Every dollar in there was money I earned and saved. You want to help Trevor? Use your own money. The mask finally slipped. Julia's face twisted into something ugly and desperate. You bastard! You can't just cut me off like that. I have bills. I have rent. You have a job. Had a job anyway. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the email I'd just sent to Mrs. Rowe, the manager at Pulse Gym. It contained Trevor's arrest record, which had taken me exactly 5 minutes to find online, along with photos of Julia and Trevor together that I'd discovered on her supposedly private Instagram account. Fitness instructors can't associate with known criminals, I said. Insurance liability, company policy. You should probably start looking for a new career. Julia lunged for my phone, but I was already moving toward the door. You're insane, she screamed. You can't destroy my life because you're jealous and paranoid. I'm not destroying anything, I called back from the hallway. I'm just stepping aside and letting you do it yourself. The last thing I heard before the elevator doors closed was Julia throwing something against the wall and screaming my name. It sounded like freedom. Bali was exactly as beautiful as the travel brochures promised, and I was having the worst time of my life. Not because of the location. The beaches were pristine, the food was incredible, and my beachfront hotel room cost less per night than Julia spent on her weekly manicures. No, I was miserable because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with increasingly desperate messages from the woman who'd just tried to steal my life savings. Message 1, sent at 6 a.m. Portland time. Mark, I'm sorry. I know I handled this wrong. Can we please talk? Message 15, sent 3 hours later. I lost my job. Mrs. Rowe fired me because of whatever lies you told her. How could you do this to me? Message 27, sent at 2 p.m. I can't pay my rent. My car payment is due tomorrow. You're destroying my life over a misunderstanding. I was sipping a beer on the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when my friend Samir called from Portland. Samir worked in IT security and had a talent for finding information that people thought they'd hidden. Dude, he said without preamble, you need to see what I found. Let me guess. More evidence that my girlfriend is a lying, cheating gold digger? Worse. Check your email. I opened my laptop and found a series of photos that made my stomach drop. Julia and Trevor at a casino, his arm around her waist. Julia and Trevor at a restaurant I recognized, the same restaurant where she'd told me she was having dinner with her sister. Julia and Trevor in what appeared to be a hotel room, both of them half-dressed and laughing. The timestamps on the photos went back 6 months. Where did you get these? I asked. Trevor's Facebook account. Idiot didn't adjust his privacy settings. There are dozens more going back almost a year. Mark, this wasn't some recent thing. She's been playing you the entire time. I stared at the photos until they blurred together. A year. Julia had been cheating on me for a year, probably longer. Every girls' night out, every family emergency, every time she'd been too tired for intimacy, she'd been with him. There's more, Samir continued. Trevor Cale isn't just some small-time gambler. He's been arrested 4 times in the past 2 years for fraud, check kiting, and identity theft. The guy's a professional scammer. And Julia knew all of this. Had to. Look at the last photo. I scrolled down and found an image that made everything click into place. Julia and Trevor at what appeared to be a legal aid office, both of them signing documents. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. They're not just sleeping together, I realized. They're working together. Bingo. I did some more digging. Trevor's been using Julia's address for his mail, her gym membership for his alibis, and her bank account information for his cons. She's not just cheating on you, Mark. She's been helping him commit crimes. I closed the laptop and walked to the edge of the beach, letting the warm water wash over my feet. The anger I'd been feeling was transforming into something colder and more focused. Julia hadn't just betrayed me. She'd made me an unwitting accomplice in whatever schemes she and Trevor were running. My phone buzzed with another message from Julia. Mark, please call me. Trevor's in serious trouble and I don't know what to do. I need you. I typed back, I know everything. Leave my life now, or you'll be needing bail next. The response came immediately. What are you talking about? You're scaring me. I forwarded her one of the casino photos, then blocked her number. But Trevor, apparently, was not so easily discouraged. 20 minutes later, I received a text from an unknown number. You don't know who you're messing with, asshole. Julia's mine, and I don't share. I showed the message to Samir over video chat. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. This guy's threatening you from jail? Apparently he made bail, probably used Julia's credit cards. So what's your next move? I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore in an endless, hypnotic rhythm. For the first time in days, I felt calm, clear-headed, ready to take control of my life instead of letting other people destroy it. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve, I said. But first, I'm going to finish my vacation. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and I want this to be absolutely freezing. Samir grinned. Need any help? Actually, yes. Can you do me a favor and forward Trevor's criminal record to a few more people? His parole officer, for starters. I have a feeling he's violated the terms of his release by leaving the state to commit fraud. On it. Anything else? I pulled up Julia's Instagram account and scrolled through her recent posts. Lots of photos of her at the gym, posing with clients, advertising her personal training services she could no longer legally provide. Send screenshots of all her posts about being a certified trainer to the Oregon Fitness Association. I want them to know she's been operating without proper credentials. Damn, Mark. Remind me never to piss you off. Too late for that advice to help Julia and Trevor. After we hung up, I ordered another beer and opened my laptop. Time to do some research. If Julia and Trevor wanted to play games with other people's lives, I was going to make sure they understood the rules. By the time I went to bed that night, I had a complete dossier on both of them. Their addresses, their employers, their family members, their social media accounts, their financial records, and their criminal histories. I also had a plan that would systematically destroy everything they'd built together. Julia had taught me an important lesson. Never trust someone who claims to love you while they're robbing you blind. Trevor had taught me another one. Bullies only respect strength. It was time to show them both exactly how strong I could be. The flight back to Portland gave me 18 hours to perfect my strategy. By the time I walked into my apartment, I had a timeline, a target list, and a deep sense of satisfaction that comes from knowing you're about to win a war your enemies didn't even know they'd started. Julia had left, as instructed, but not without making her feelings clear. Every piece of furniture I'd bought was either missing or damaged. She'd poured bleach on my clothes, broken my coffee machine, and left a note on the refrigerator that said, "Hope you're happy, you controlling psychopath." The note made me smile. If she thought I was controlling before, she was going to love what came next. I spent my first day back setting up surveillance, hidden cameras in the hallway, a GPS tracker on my car, in case Trevor decided to get creative with his vandalism, and monitoring software on all my devices. I also hired a private investigator named Rebecca Stone, a former police detective who specialized in fraud cases. Your girlfriend and her boyfriend have been busy while you were gone, Rebecca told me during our first meeting. Trevor's been using your address for several credit card applications. Julia's been telling people you're engaged and that you're buying a house together. They've been running a long con, probably planning to clean out your accounts and disappear. Can we prove it? Already did. I have documentation of the credit fraud, witness statements from people they've scammed, and evidence of identity theft. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I leaned back in my chair and considered my options. I could go to the police, have them both arrested, and let the legal system handle it. Clean, simple, and ultimately unsatisfying. Or I could take a more creative approach. I want to destroy them, I said. Legally, publicly, and completely. I want everyone they know to understand exactly what kind of people they are. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. That's not usually how I operate. I'll pay you double your usual rate. In that case, I'm listening. The plan we developed was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of having Julia and Trevor arrested immediately, we would expose their crimes gradually, systematically destroying their reputations and their ability to hurt other people. Every revelation would be carefully timed and strategically placed for maximum impact. Phase 1 began the next morning. I called Mrs. Rowe at Pulse Gym and arranged to meet her for coffee. She was a stern woman in her 50s who'd built her business on trust and reputation, the kind of person who took fraud personally. I wanted to thank you for firing Julia, I told her, but I also wanted to make sure you knew the full extent of what she was doing. I showed her the evidence Rebecca had compiled. Julia had been stealing from clients, using the gym's facilities for unauthorized personal training sessions and selling fake nutrition supplements out of her locker. More importantly, she'd been using client information to help Trevor identify potential fraud targets. Mrs. Rowe's face went white as she read through the documentation. She was using our member database for identity theft? Trevor would pick out wealthy members, Julia would get their personal information during training sessions, and then they'd apply for credit cards and loans using that data. Your gym was essentially their hunting ground. Jesus Christ, I need to call the police. I'd wait on that, I suggested. If you call the police now, they'll just arrest Trevor and Julia, and your members will never know how their information was compromised. But if you send a letter to all your members explaining what happened and how you're protecting them going forward, you'll actually strengthen your business. Mrs. Rowe nodded slowly. And Julia will be blacklisted from every gym in the city. That's the idea. By noon, every fitness center in Portland had received a detailed warning about Julia Hayes and Trevor Cale. By evening, Julia's phone was ringing nonstop with angry former clients who'd just learned their personal information had been compromised. Phase 2 launched the next day. Trevor had been staying at a cheap motel on the east side, apparently unaware that his every move was being monitored. Rebecca had been following him for days, documenting his activities and identifying his associates. What we found was a small-time criminal enterprise that was about to become front-page news. Trevor wasn't just running credit card scams with Julia. He was also involved in a car theft ring, a check-washing operation, and a fake charity that claimed to help homeless veterans. The man was a one-person crime wave, and he'd been using Julia's connections to expand his operations. I called the local news station and arranged to meet with an investigative reporter named Mike Chen. I gave him everything: photos, documents, witness statements, and a detailed timeline of Trevor's criminal activities. "This is huge," Mike said, flipping through the evidence. "We're talking about dozens of victims and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraud. Why are you giving this to me instead of the police?" "Who says I'm not giving it to the police? But I want people to know what happened. I want Trevor's face on every television in the city so that no one else gets victimized by him." The story ran that evening. Trevor's mugshot filled the screen while the anchor described his extensive criminal enterprise that targeted vulnerable Portland residents. Julia's photo appeared next, identified as his alleged accomplice and girlfriend. My phone started ringing immediately. Julia, calling from different numbers, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. "Mark, you have to stop this. I didn't know about most of what Trevor was doing. I was a victim too. The news is saying I helped him steal cars. I don't even know how to hotwire a car. Please, Mark. I'm sorry about everything, but this isn't fair. You're destroying my life over a relationship that didn't even mean anything." I listened to each message carefully, then deleted them. Julia was right about one thing. I was destroying her life. But it wasn't over a relationship. It was over a year-long criminal conspiracy that had made me an unwitting victim and accomplice. The final message came at 2 a.m. "I know you're listening to these. Trevor's gone crazy. He blames you for everything that's happening, and he's talking about making you pay. Be careful, Mark. He's not stable." I saved that message and forwarded it to Rebecca. If Trevor wanted to escalate this into something physical, I was ready for him. The next morning, I found my car keyed and my apartment building's front door spray-painted with profanity. Trevor was making his move, just as Julia had warned. But he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd committed vandalism while under police surveillance. Rebecca called me at work with the good news. "Trevor's been arrested for destruction of property and violation of parole. He's looking at 18 months minimum, probably more when the fraud charges are added." "What about Julia?" "She's next. The district attorney wants to offer her a deal, testify against Trevor in exchange for reduced charges, but that's assuming she takes it." I smiled, imagining Julia's face when she realized her choices had been reduced to betraying Trevor or going to prison with him. Either way, she was finished. But I wasn't done with either of them yet. Prison would keep them from hurting other people, but it wouldn't undo the damage they'd done to me. For that, I needed something more personal. Something that would make them understand exactly what it felt like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. Julia's family intervention was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon at her mother's house in suburban Beaverton. I knew about it because Julia's sister Karen had called me, apparently unaware that Julia and I were no longer together. "We're really worried about her," Karen explained. "She's been acting strange and we heard she lost her job. Mom thought maybe you could help us understand what's going on." I could have explained the situation over the phone, but that would have been too easy. Instead, I agreed to attend the intervention, bringing with me a carefully prepared presentation that would ensure Julia's family understood exactly who they were dealing with. The Hayes family had always impressed me with their middle-class respectability. Julia's father was a retired accountant, her mother taught elementary school, and her two siblings were both married with children. They lived in a tidy ranch house with a well-maintained garden and family photos covering every surface. They had no idea their daughter was a criminal. I arrived exactly on time, carrying a laptop bag and wearing my most professional outfit. Julia was already there, sitting on the couch between her parents, looking pale and desperate. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Mark," she said when I walked in, "I'm so glad you came. I've been trying to reach you." "I know," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. "I've been busy." Julia's mother, Patricia, offered me coffee and thanked me for coming. "We're all very concerned about Julia. She says she's been having some problems at work, but she won't give us any details. We were hoping you could help us understand what's happening." I opened my laptop and connected it to their television. "I'd be happy to explain everything, but I should warn you, some of this might be difficult to hear." The presentation I'd prepared was thorough and devastating. It began with photos of Julia and Trevor together, progressing through their criminal activities, and ending with news footage of Trevor's arrest. I narrated each slide calmly and professionally, like I was giving a business presentation instead of destroying someone's life. Julia's family watched in stunned silence as I laid out the evidence. Bank records showing suspicious transactions, text messages between Julia and Trevor discussing their marks, photos of Julia at crime scenes, witness statements from victims who'd been defrauded. "This can't be true," Patricia whispered when I finished. "Julia would never do something like this." Julia had been crying silently throughout my presentation, but now she exploded. "It's all lies. Mark's doing this because I broke up with him. He's obsessed with me and he's trying to destroy my life." I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail Julia had left 3 days earlier. "Mark, please, you have to help me. The police want to arrest me and I don't have anywhere to go. I know I hurt you, but I love you. I've always loved you. Trevor was just a mistake, a stupid mistake that got out of control." The room fell silent. Julia's father, a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, stood up and walked to the window. "How long has this been going on?" he asked without turning around. "According to the police, at least 18 months, I replied. "Possibly longer." Julia's sister Karen was staring at her in horror. "Julie, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't steal from people." "I didn't steal from anyone," Julia screamed. "I helped Trevor with some business stuff, but I didn't know it was illegal. I thought he was running legitimate companies." I clicked to the next slide, which showed a text message Julia had sent to Trevor. "The old lady from the gym gave me her social security number. She's worth at least 50 grand according to her credit report." Julia's mother made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. "I think I've seen enough," Julia's father said, finally turning around. "Julia, I want you to pack your things and leave. You're not welcome in this house until you've made this right." "Dad, please." "Now." I closed my laptop and stood up. "I'm sorry you had to learn about this from me. I know how much you all love Julia, and I know this is painful, but these people need to be held accountable for what they've done." Patricia walked me to the door, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for telling us the truth. I'm so sorry she hurt you." As I drove away, I could see Julia through the front window, screaming at her family while they stared at her in disgust. Her support system, her safety net, her last refuge, all gone in the span of an hour. But I still wasn't finished. The next phase of my plan required patience and precise timing. Julia was now facing criminal charges, social ostracism, and family rejection. She was desperate, which made her dangerous, but also predictable. Desperate people make mistakes, and I was counting on Julia to make a big one. She didn't disappoint me. 2 days after the family intervention, Julia showed up at my apartment building at midnight, drunk and belligerent. The security cameras captured everything as she pounded on my door, screaming about how I'd ruined her life and demanding that I fix everything. When I didn't answer, she tried to break down the door. When that failed, she started throwing rocks at my windows. The police arrived just as she was attempting to climb the fire escape, apparently planning to break into my apartment through the balcony. The arrest was broadcast live on the local news station's Facebook page. Julia Hayes, former fitness instructor and alleged fraudster, being dragged away in handcuffs while screaming my name and threatening to make me pay for destroying her life. The video went viral within hours. By morning, it had been shared thousands of times, with comments ranging from mockery to outrage. Julia's public breakdown had transformed her from a criminal defendant into a social media laughingstock. I watched the coverage from my office, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Julia had spent a year systematically betraying me, stealing from me, and planning to disappear with my life savings. Now she was facing the consequences of those choices, and the whole world was watching. My assistant knocked on my door around noon. "Mark, there's a reporter here who wants to talk to you about your ex-girlfriend." I straightened my tie and checked my reflection in the computer screen. Time for the final act of this particular drama. The reporter was young and eager, the kind of journalist who saw every story as a potential career maker. She wanted to know how it felt to discover that someone I loved was a criminal, how I'd uncovered the fraud scheme, and what I thought should happen to Julia and Trevor. I answered every question thoughtfully and honestly, portraying myself as a victim who'd been forced to seek justice when the system failed to protect me. I expressed sadness about Julia's downfall, concern for the other victims, and hope that my experience would help other people recognize the warning signs of fraud. The interview aired that evening, just as Julia was being released on bail. I came across as sympathetic and reasonable, a man who'd been wronged but was handling the situation with dignity and grace. Julia, by contrast, was shown in handcuffs, screaming incoherently, looking like exactly what she was, a desperate criminal who'd finally been caught. The story was picked up by national news outlets, turning Julia and Trevor into poster children for romance fraud and identity theft. Their photos appeared in magazines and websites across the country, ensuring that they'd never be able to run the same scam again. But there was still one more move to make, one final humiliation that would complete my revenge and guarantee that Julia and Trevor understood the full cost of their betrayal. I picked up my phone and dialed Rebecca Stone's number. "It's time for the grand finale," I told her. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for weeks. Let's finish this." Trevor's release from jail lasted exactly 48 hours. He'd made bail using money from his mother's retirement account, a fact I discovered through Rebecca's investigation of his financial records. The poor woman had no idea she was funding her son's criminal enterprise, just like I'd had no idea I was bankrolling Julia's betrayal. But Trevor's freedom was temporary and strategic. Rebecca had been monitoring his activities since his release, waiting for him to make the mistake we knew was coming. Desperate criminals don't suddenly become law-abiding citizens just because they've been arrested. They escalate. Trevor's first stop after jail was Julia's new apartment, a studio in a rundown complex on the east side. The building was the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask questions about visitors. Perfect for our purposes, since Rebecca had installed surveillance equipment in the hallway 3 days earlier. The audio we captured was everything I'd hoped for and more. "This is all your fault," Trevor screamed at Julia through her thin apartment door. "If you hadn't been so obvious about the gym thing, none of this would have happened." "My fault?" Julia's voice was shrill and desperate. "You're the one who got arrested. You're the one who couldn't keep your mouth shut about the credit cards." "Open the damn door, Julia. We need to figure out how to fix this." "There's nothing to fix. It's over, Trevor. We're both going to prison because of your stupid schemes." The argument continued for 20 minutes, with Trevor alternating between threats and pleas, while Julia refused to let him in. Eventually, he gave up and left, but not before kicking her door hard enough to crack the frame. Rebecca called me with an update that evening. "Trevor's planning something big. He withdrew $5,000 from his mother's account this morning, and he's been making phone calls to people with serious criminal records. I think he's planning to run, but he wants to settle scores first." "Meaning me." "Meaning you. I've already contacted the police, but they can't arrest him for making phone calls. We need to catch him in the act of committing a crime." I'd been expecting this moment since the beginning. Trevor was a bully and a coward, but he was also desperate enough to be dangerous. He blamed me for his arrest, his public humiliation, and his relationship problems with Julia. In his mind, eliminating me would solve all his problems. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The trap we set was simple and effective. I would go about my normal routine, but with heavy surveillance and backup. Rebecca would monitor Trevor's movements while undercover police officers maintained visual contact with me. When Trevor made his move, we'd be ready. He took the bait on Thursday evening. I was leaving my office building when Rebecca called with a warning. "Trevor's in the parking garage. He's got something in his hand, probably a weapon. Police are 30 seconds out." I could have waited for backup, but I was tired of being afraid of a small-time criminal who thought he could intimidate me. Instead, I walked directly toward my car, making myself an obvious target. Trevor stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, holding a crowbar and trying to look menacing. He was wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, like he was in some kind of action movie. "You ruined my life, you bastard," he snarled, raising the crowbar. "Time to return the favor." I stopped walking and looked at him calmly. "You ruined your own life, Trevor. I just made sure everyone knew about it." "Shut up." He took a step closer, and I could see that his hands were shaking. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can destroy people and just walk away?" "I think I can defend myself from criminals who threaten me. The question is, are you stupid enough to assault someone in a building with security cameras?" Trevor glanced around nervously, suddenly realizing that his plan might not be as clever as he'd thought. But he was too committed to back down now. "I don't care about cameras. You destroyed everything I had. My business, my reputation, my relationship with Julia. You turned everyone against me. I didn't turn anyone against you. I just showed them who you really are." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Trevor screamed and rushed toward me, swinging the crowbar wildly. I sidestepped easily. Desperation doesn't improve coordination, and watched him stumble past me into a parked car. The police arrived just as Trevor was getting back to his feet, crowbar still in hand, clearly preparing for another attack. They tackled him to the ground and cuffed him, while he screamed about how I'd framed him and destroyed his life. "Assault with a weapon," one of the officers told me as they loaded Trevor into the patrol car, plus violation of parole, stalking, and probably a few other charges. He's going away for a long time. I watched the police car disappear into traffic, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Trevor's criminal career was officially over, and he'd have years in prison to think about the choices that had led him there. But Julia was still free, and she was about to become much more desperate. The news of Trevor's arrest hit her like a physical blow. Rebecca's surveillance equipment captured her complete breakdown when she saw the story on the evening news. Julia threw her television against the wall, screamed until her voice gave out, and then sat on her floor crying for 3 hours. She called me that night, her voice barely a whisper. "You won, Mark. Are you happy now? Trevor's in jail. I'm facing federal charges. My family won't speak to me, and I can't get a job anywhere in the city. You completely destroyed my life." "You destroyed your own life," I replied, echoing what I'd told Trevor. "I just made sure you couldn't destroy anyone else's. I loved you. I know I made mistakes, but I really did love you." "No, you didn't. You loved my money and my stability. You loved having someone to fall back on while you were stealing from innocent people. But you never loved me." Julia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. "You're right," she said. "I never loved you. You were just a mark, just like all the others. But you were supposed to be an easy mark, and instead, you turned into my worst nightmare. Is that supposed to hurt my feelings? No, it's supposed to be the truth. You want to know what I really think of you, Mark? You're a pathetic, vindictive little man who can't handle being rejected. You've spent months destroying my life because your ego couldn't accept that I chose someone else." I smiled, knowing that Julia couldn't see my expression, but hoping she could hear it in my voice. "You're absolutely right. I am vindictive. I am petty. And I am very, very good at destroying people who try to steal from me. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Trevor's in jail, you're going to prison, and I'm moving on with my life. The only question now is whether you're going to accept responsibility for what you've done or spend the next few years blaming everyone else for your problems." Julia hung up without answering, but I already knew which path she'd choose. People like Julia and Trevor never accepted responsibility for their actions. They were victims in their own minds, no matter how much evidence suggested otherwise. But their self-perception was irrelevant now. The legal system would hold them accountable. The public would remember their crimes, and I would finally be free to rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder. Or so I thought. Julia's final move was the most desperate and dangerous of all, and it came from a direction I hadn't anticipated. She couldn't hurt me directly anymore. The police were watching her too closely, but she could still damage my reputation and my career if she was clever enough. The attack came through my employer's human resources department. The call from HR came on a Friday morning, just as I was settling in with my coffee and reviewing code for our latest software release. Janet Morrison, our head of human resources, sounded uncomfortable and apologetic. "Mark, I need you to come to my office immediately. We've received some very serious allegations about your conduct, and we need to discuss them before this goes any further." I knew immediately what had happened. Julia had made her final play, and she'd aimed it directly at the one thing I couldn't afford to lose: my career. Janet's office was on the executive floor, with windows overlooking the city and expensive furniture that reminded everyone who entered that this was where important decisions were made. She gestured for me to sit across from her desk, then opened a thick folder with my name on it. "We received an email yesterday from someone claiming to be your ex-girlfriend," Janet began. "She's alleging that you've been stalking her, harassing her family, and using company resources to conduct personal vendettas. She's also claiming that you've been accessing confidential databases to gather information about her for illegal purposes." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Did she provide any evidence to support these allegations? She sent screenshots of text messages, copies of emails, and what appears to be surveillance footage of you following her. Mark, if even half of this is true, we're looking at potential criminal charges and a massive lawsuit against the company. "Can I see the evidence?" Janet turned her laptop around so I could view Julia's submission. It was professionally prepared and superficially convincing. The text messages appeared to show me threatening Julia and demanding that she return money she'd borrowed. The emails seemed to document a campaign of harassment against her family and friends. The surveillance footage showed someone who looked like me watching Julia's apartment from a parked car. It was all fake, of course. But it was well-crafted fake evidence that could cause serious problems if I couldn't prove it was fabricated. Fortunately, I'd been preparing for exactly this scenario. "Janet, before you make any decisions based on this information, I need to show you something. Can you give me access to your computer for 5 minutes?" She hesitated, then turned the laptop back toward me. I opened my cloud storage account and pulled up the folder I'd labeled Insurance Policy. "Everything Julia sent you is fabricated," I explained as I navigated through my files. "The text messages are fake. Here are the real ones, with metadata showing when they were sent and received. The emails are doctored versions of legitimate correspondence. Here are the originals. And the surveillance footage shows someone else entirely. Here's proof that I was in Bali when that video was supposedly taken." Janet's expression changed as she reviewed my evidence. "How did you know she was going to do this?" "Because I know how desperate people behave when they're facing prison time. Julia's been arrested for fraud, her accomplice is in jail, and she's looking at federal charges. She's trying to discredit me before her trial begins, hoping to convince a jury that I framed her out of spite." I clicked through to the next folder, which contained Rebecca Stone's complete investigation file. This is everything the police have on Julia and Trevor's criminal enterprise: financial records, witness statements, surveillance footage, and documented evidence of identity theft and fraud. Julia wasn't my girlfriend, Janet. She was a criminal who was using me as part of an elaborate con game. By the time I finished my presentation, Janet looked stunned. "My God, Mark, I had no idea. I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just want to make sure the company understands that Julia's allegations are part of a broader pattern of criminal behavior. She's not a victim. She's a convicted felon who's trying to manipulate the legal system." Janet closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "What do you need from us?" "I need you to forward Julia's fake evidence to the district attorney's office. Fabricating evidence and filing false police reports are felonies. This little stunt just added years to her potential sentence." "Consider it done. Is there anything else we can do to support you?" I stood up and straightened my tie. Actually, yes. I'd like to take a few days off next week. I have a feeling Julia's trial is going to be very interesting, and I want to be there to watch her face the consequences of her choices. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in downtown Portland's federal courthouse. Julia had managed to hire a decent lawyer, probably using money stolen from her victims, but even the best attorney in the world couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence against her. I sat in the gallery, watching as prosecutor after prosecutor laid out the case against Julia and Trevor. Financial records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent transactions. Testimony from victims who'd had their identities stolen and their credit destroyed. Surveillance footage of Julia and Trevor casing potential targets at the gym. Julia tried to maintain her composure, but I could see her facade cracking as the evidence mounted. She'd convinced herself that she was the victim in this situation, that I was the real criminal who'd orchestrated her downfall. But the jury wasn't buying her story. The most damaging testimony came from Trevor himself. Facing life in prison, he'd agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. He described in detail how Julia had recruited victims, gathered their personal information, and helped him execute complex fraud schemes. Julia was the brains of the operation, Trevor testified, refusing to look at her. She understood people, knew how to gain their trust and get them to reveal personal information. I just handled the technical stuff, the fake IDs, the credit applications, the money transfers. Julia's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. Her own partner had just described her as the mastermind of their criminal enterprise. When Julia finally took the stand in her own defense, she tried to portray herself as a naive woman who'd been manipulated by both Trevor and me. She claimed that Trevor had forced her to help with his schemes, and that I had fabricated evidence against her out of jealousy and spite. But the prosecutor was ready for her lies. He methodically dismantled her story, using her own text messages and emails to prove that she'd been an active and enthusiastic participant in every aspect of their criminal activities. The final blow came when he played a recording that Rebecca had captured during one of Julia's visits to Trevor's motel room. In it, Julia could be heard laughing about their stupid marks and planning their next targets. "These people deserve what they get," Julia's voice said clearly through the courtroom speakers. "If they're dumb enough to trust strangers with their personal information, they deserve to lose their money." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Julia's sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month, but I didn't need to attend to know the outcome. She was facing 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 7 years. Trevor had received 12 years, despite his cooperation. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of closure that had been missing from my life for months. Julia and Trevor were finally facing the consequences of their actions. Their victims would receive some measure of justice, and I could move forward without looking over my shoulder. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, I worried that Julia had found another way to harass me, but the message was from someone else entirely. "Mr. Ellison, this is Sarah Chen from the Portland Tribune. I've been following your case, and I'd like to interview you about romance fraud and how people can protect themselves from scams like this. Would you be interested in speaking with me?" I smiled and typed back, "I'd be happy to help. When and where would you like to meet?" It was time to turn my experience into something positive, something that could help other people avoid the trap I'd fallen into. Julia and Trevor had taught me valuable lessons about trust, betrayal, and the importance of protecting yourself from people who see you as nothing more than a source of money. But they'd also taught me something else, that justice, when properly applied, can be more satisfying than any revenge. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove toward my future, leaving Julia and Trevor to face theirs in federal prison. 3 months later, I received one final letter from Julia, postmarked from the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short and handwritten on prison stationery. Mark, I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I don't blame you. I made terrible choices, and I hurt a lot of people, including you. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Prison has given me time to think about who I was and who I want to become. I'm getting my GED and learning job skills that don't involve stealing from people. I know it doesn't make up for what I did, but it's a start. I hope you're happy and that you found someone who deserves you. You're a good man, and I'm sorry I was too selfish to appreciate that when it mattered. Julia P.S. Trevor sends his apologies too. We're both in protective custody because some of our victims had connections to people who don't believe in letting the legal system handle justice. I read the letter twice, then filed it away with the rest of the documentation from this chapter of my life. Julia sounded sincere, but I'd learned not to trust her words without corresponding actions. Time would tell whether her remorse was genuine or just another manipulation. Either way, it was no longer my problem. I had moved on, found someone new, and built a life that didn't revolve around looking backward or seeking revenge. The best victory over people like Julia and Trevor wasn't destroying them. It was becoming so successful and happy that their betrayal seemed like a favor in retrospect. But I kept Rebecca Stone's number in my phone just in case. Some lessons are too valuable to forget.